Howdy, friends. This is Taylor. Welcome to the podcast. This is bonus content for episode 63. I cut it out from the rest of the episode because this contains full spoilers for Star Wars The Last Jedi, my thoughts on the movie, and how I saw faith and culture mixed up within this movie. So here you go, segment 3 of episode 63, where we get down and dirty with Star Wars The Last Jedi. Hope you guys enjoy. Let me know what you think of the movie and what you think of this segment. Have a happy new year. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Forte Catholic Radio. This is your host, Taylor Schroll. I want to thank the Folkesons for coming on to this week's show. They were a blast to have here in the studio. And today, in our final segment of this week's show, I want to do something that I've been looking forward to doing for a couple weeks. I mentioned it last week. This segment of the podcast, of the radio show, is going to be full spoilers for Star Wars The Last Jedi. If you have not seen the movie yet, turn the dial. This is like the one time ever I'll tell you not to listen to the radio show, but I don't want to be the guy that ruined Star Wars The Last Jedi for you. It's been a couple weeks that it's been out now by this point, so I do want to do it in a timely fashion and share my thoughts on what I thought of the movie, how it connects to our faith, and some of my favorite scenes from said movie. So here we go. Without further ado, again, full spoilers for Star Wars The Last Jedi. Here we go. First one, I'll start off with something kind of funny. Chewbacca and the Porg. Everybody loves the Porgs. They're like they're like little kids. They're like little, I don't know, Chewy toys. Like, I don't know what they are. The Chewy toys is actually kind of funny since that's kind of what we're going to be talking about here. So Chewbacca, we see him sitting at a fire when he's visiting a planet that has the Porgs on them with a roasted Porg that just came out of the fire that he's about to eat. And then the camera swings over to this group of, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 other Porgs looking up at Chewie with like these puppy eyes like, oh my goodness, what have you done? And of course, Chewie, does his Chewie yell at them, and they run off. But one of the funnier parts of the movie is not only their puppy eyes, but Chewie's reaction to them. He yells at them initially, but then after they run off, he stares at the roasted Porg, and he's like, oh, like, I can't eat this now. This is like their cousin or something, and they're right there. And he doesn't end up eating it, which I think was interesting as I was thinking about when I watched the movie. He and one of the Porgs end up becoming friends, is his new riding partner on the Millennium Falcon that we see throughout the rest of the movie. The Porgs jumping around the cockpit and Chewie's like pushing him out of the way, but they become friends. And I'm like, wow, that is quite a turn of events here now, wasn't it? He was just eating his cousin or some kind of relative, or maybe his best friend from school. We don't know. And now they're friends again. So from Chewie's perspective, he's encountering something, and this somehow, quote unquote, humanizes the issue of eating them. Obviously, they're not humans, but he encounters these Porgs, and it makes him rethink his eating of this animal. Now, I'm not going the like PETA route. Like, I love eating animals. I don't know if I'd eat a Porg. That's a whole nother question, but I don't have to worry about that question because, sorry kids, they're not real. So he no longer saw them as quote unquote other, but eventually becomes friends with them. From the Porg's perspective, obviously he was quite scared of Chewbacca at some point. He ran away, but sometime off screen, he obviously stepped out in courage to be around this beast again in Chewbacca. He didn't hold the roasting of his friend against Chewie. If that isn't a symbol of loving your enemies, I don't know what is. So what can we take away from these two guys, or these two animals' relation, whatever they are, right? Number one, being courageous in fraternal correction, but not seeing people who disagree with us as these beasts. Like, this is what the Porg did. He encountered Chewbacca doing something that he thought was wrong, was scared, ran away, but eventually came back. And for both of them, until we were able to see each other as human beings with dignity, like we'll never be able to have real dialogue. Like Chewbacca and this Porg should not be friends, but because Chewbacca was willing to have his heart softened and changed on something that he was wrong on, and then for this Porg to step out and do some fraternal correction, to be able to say like, hey, I don't think what you did was right, and for them to actually be friends now would be a miracle in our modern day lives. Because I feel like so often, like when Catholics disagree with people, we're like, oh, like those are the people who want gay marriage, or those are the people who want abortion to be legal, and we instantly make them a beast. Like we instantly make them something less than us. And like why we know that they shouldn't be for those things. Like we're never going to offer them a chance to change by saying things like, abortion is killing babies. Like that can, I'm sure that's worked for a few people, but that's not how we're going to win the hearts of these people who may disagree with us or disagree with the church on these true things. So I think that was my funny little one there at the beginning. Let's move on to some of the bigger characters here, shall we? So Rey obviously is one of the main characters of the film. The first scene that we see her in is the end of the movie we got 2 years ago. So we've been waiting to see what Luke would say to Rey after 2 years. Rey's been waiting for, 20, 30 seconds or something, quite awkwardly. She, has been seeking him out. She traveled to find him. This is all what happened in episode 7. And then he finally acts, but one of the funniest parts of the movie, I love it, where he just throws the lightsaber over his shoulder. Like totally not what I expected at all. Like I thought he was going to be like, there was rumors that he was just going to say like, who are you? Like, what are you doing here? But he just throws it over his shoulder and walks away. Like not what we expected and not at all what she expected. He doesn't even want to talk to her. And so I was like, okay, like what is the parallel here? And I feel like that at times going to church can be very similar to Rey's experience of going to meet Luke. People get all excited. It's like, oh, yeah, this is going to be great. I'm going to learn from this master. I'm going to learn how to be a better person. I'm going to get stronger in my religion. Like obviously their religion is the Jedi religion. Ours is Catholicism. We encounter this religion and maybe the leader of these religions, and we search for it, we find it, we're excited, and then it's not quite what it seems. I don't know if you've ever experienced, but people in the church can be quite difficult. They can be nasty, or even at times seem quote unquote completely closed off to the Force, right? And by that I mean like closed off to God, or letting Him impact their lives, their choices, and their words. So what is it that Rey did that won the day? Because obviously, towards the end of the movie, like even in the beginning, Luke finally agrees to mentor her, to train her in the Jedi way. It's her persistence that brought about that change. She just followed him around. She knocked. She walked around the island. She continued her training. She continued, swinging her lightsaber, all these kinds of things, right? And this is what changed the heart of Luke. And so I think there are two different ways that I've been looking at this. It's like, one, there are some similarities to like my relationship and probably some of your relationships with God. You seek, you find, you search. You've been told that, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be opened. And you're like, man, I've been seeking and knocking, and I haven't seemed to got an answer in quite some time. And then you're like, well, is the Bible wrong? Like, is Jesus wrong? It says that if you seek, you'll find. Nowhere in that verse does it say immediately. I'm like, that's just something we have to come to terms with. Like, we all have ups and downs in our faith life and our prayer life with God, like how close we feel to Him. But it's Rey's persistence, even when, like she was not getting what she wanted and not getting what what she thought was going to happen, she consistently still sought out Luke and still did the things like for her training that she wanted to. She was using her lightsaber. She was searching around the island for things to grow in her strength, in her Jedi strength. So I think for you and me, when we're trying to seek out God, that persistence is a big thing that we all need, because you've already experienced them most likely. There's just times that it's going to get very hard to continue seeking out the Lord. But just like in the movie, Luke eventually comes around, and like, it's not that God doesn't want it. Is the dissimilarity, obviously, that God isn't like Luke in the way that he's like, no, I don't want to talk to you. But it can seem at times like he's not there, and we can look at it like he's being like Luke. But of course, he is always there in the background. So now let's talk about Luke, because one of the biggest controversies about the movie, I absolutely love the movie, by the way. A lot of people, the quote unquote true Star Wars fans, didn't like it. But 93% of the people that have watched it have, so I don't know what to tell you. I thought it was fantastic, but Luke was a big point of controversy, especially in the stuff that we were already talking about. Like, he has been the symbol of hope throughout the galaxy for tens of decades now, tens of years. And now he's lost his hope. We find out that he doesn't want to talk to Rey, that he has closed himself off from the Force, and everybody's like, how can the symbol of hope lose all hope? Let's just think about Luke's story here for a second. He lost his father. Like, his father, he had to come to the grips of, Luke, you are my father. Like, this terrible guy was his dad. And then obviously he lost him in episode 6. He's the last of the Jedi. He tried to not be the last of the Jedi, 10, 20 years ago, but he failed his nephew. He failed Ben Solo. He failed the future of the Order. It all fell apart. And now, at the time being, he is the last Jedi. And thus, he's also failed his mentors. He's failed Obi-Wan. He's failed Yoda, because, he was the last of his kind and he couldn't continue the Jedi Order. He's the reason that, his little nephew became Kylo Ren. And it's because Kylo saw Luke trying to kill him, right? So that's one of the big reveals in the movie, is that Kylo wasn't one of the big things is that he hasn't been pure evil, but the big reveal is that the reason he finally turns, why he finally caves, is that he looks up in his sleep and he sees Luke standing over him with a lightsaber. And as Luke's telling the story, he's like, I saw the darkness in him, just like he's seen the darkness in his father. He saw darkness all throughout the Empire. And he's like, this is going to happen again. And so he's like, I need to just stop it here and now. So for this brief moment, and he says immediately he regrets it, and he's about to turn his saber off and walk away. But then Kylo wakes up and he sees Luke, the guy he trusted, trying to kill him. And, the rest is history. Ben Solo becomes Kylo. And it's like, so how does Luke react to this? He completely shuts himself off from the Force and wants the Jedi Order to end. So how does this make sense? Because I had this discussion on Facebook with a friend of mine who hates that Luke lost his hope. And I just want to tell you that there have been dozens and dozens of stories of people who have been around the church or around ministry who, for so many years, played a huge role in bringing people closer to Christ, huge role at the church, only to fall away later in life due to all kinds of things. Just like Luke had all of his things that were struggles in his life, he just finally got beat down and didn't want to continue. And I've seen this. I've seen this in youth ministers. I've seen this. We've seen it, sadly, in priests. We've seen it in the Catholicism or former Catholics is the second largest religion in America. We know that this can get hard. Life can get hard, and we can shut ourselves off from, not like what Luke does is the Force, but we can shut ourselves off from God. We can shut ourselves off from the church. And I can see this even in my own life. There have been times where I live in the church. I work at church. I'm in ministry doing this stuff all the time. And I'm supposed to be this, beacon of hope, this beacon of truth, this beacon of love. And I can't do that all the time, right? I fail, I fall just like anybody else. And there are times where like I just feel like I'm getting beat down over and over again, where I begin to lose my hope. Where I start to close myself off from God. Like my prayer life starts to struggle and all these kinds of things. And I'm like, I can totally relate with Luke in some of these situations. But what changes it? Like we said a few minutes ago, it's Rey's persistence, speaking to his good old Force ghost Yoda. So it's other people coming to meet him, which is Rey's persistence. It's the Force ghost of Yoda coming to talk to him, which I think is like our church fathers or our church leaders, and the distress symbol from his sister that changed his mind. All these things work together to bring him back to having hope and saying, like I can be this beacon of hope again. So he opens himself up to the Force, and in one of the more epic moments in Star Wars history, walks out to take on the entire resistance, get shot at with all their cannons. The dust settles, and he does the whole Jay-Z, get that dirt off your shoulder type thing, which a lot of people think is corny, and I might agree, but it was funny, and everybody in the theater when I was watching it laughed. And it was just this epic moment, right? Like he comes back, he saves what's left of the resistance, he saves his sister, and he saves the Last Jedi. Because all this time where he said the Jedi Order is going to end, what he saw in Rey, he said one of the best lines in the movie, in thinking of Rey, I will not be the Last Jedi. Just so epic. And I think we can't walk away from talking about a Star Wars movie without talking about the fight between good and evil. And we see this mostly in Rey and Kylo Ren. Both of them, the whole movie is about them fighting with the dark and the light within them. She thought she could change him and bring him over. He thought he could change her. And I think one of the points is that it's not too late either way. People can be quote unquote dark side. They can be doing bad things. They can be away from the church. It's not too late for them. And in the same way, people can be in the church forever. It's not too late for them to turn back and turn their back on God either. Like we have to consistently and constantly choose the good. And one of the interesting things in their relationship is that they're both being played by Snoke, by the evil one, right? Like they were being toyed with by this evil power. And I think when we look at Rey, who's the light side, who we want to be on that side as well, like the one thing that's going to keep us from falling to the dark side is coming back to where we receive our strength. As we go and try to help people to see the light, where are you coming back to receive your strength? In the church, through prayer, in your community, whatever. So that's it. That's our spoiler cast in this last segment of the podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We will be back next week for our first episode of the new year. See ya!